Hello, everyone. Dr. Anna Cabeca here on Couch Talk today to just talk about more fun, interesting information and really what's cutting edge in medicine. Today, I have a special guest with us that has been an expert really in the nutritional space and functional nutrition and using food as medicine for optimal health. In fact, she has a cookbook that she published in 2016 called Naturally Nourished, Food as Medicine for Optimal Health. And she's recently released her anti-anxiety diet book. So I'm thrilled to have Allie Miller on with me today. Hey, Allie, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's good to have you here. I'd like to tell our
Yes,
audience about how we've met because
totally.
we were at KetoCon together. And that is a fabulous get together of like-minded people working with empowering people through keto programs and what that really means. And so I met Allie there, and she's had all the integrative and functional aspects of nutrition, of testing, analyses through food sensitivities. And I was like, oh, great. And all her research oriented and just also a fabulous speaker and a fabulous person. So
Thank
I'm glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit more about your
And we shared
background.
a panel. We shared that, I forget what it was called. I think it was just medical expert keto panel, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, actually love the panels and just to hear the different responses or similar responses to the questions that come up. And
For
that's
sure.
very
For
fun.
sure.
Yeah.
So my background is in naturopathic medicine. So I went to Bastyr University outside of Seattle, Washington, and it is one of the only accredited naturopathic colleges of medicine that the American Medical Association acknowledges based on the curriculum and the criteria that they have within their board examination program. So I actually, instead of going the ND or naturopathic doctor route, I went the RD route and became a registered dietitian. And I quickly moved from the Seattle area to Houston, Texas for the Texas Medical Center. And I did all of my dietetic rotations and checked off all my boxes. And then I worked for 3 years for a physician's practice group. And I was their director of integrative medicine. And I predominantly worked there with dysmetabolic syndrome. So we were working with hypertension, hyperlipidemia, so elevated blood pressure, elevated cholesterol levels, and diabetes. And then I also ran a medical weight loss program there where we use the ketogenic diet. And I really transitioned the program from what was like a meta-fast, very low calorie, very processed powdered shake program into a real food, fat as fuel, keto food as medicine program. And then after 3 years of doing that, I opened my private practice, Naturally Nourished, and I'm in my 6th year of running my clinic. I transitioned last year virtually. I have a 2-year-old now. And so it was, I had a 5-year lease, and I knew once I got pregnant, I was like, I got to figure out something to create this bubble. And I know too well, being a functional medicine practitioner, that if you don't feel mentally and emotionally on board with your day-to-day lifestyle, and if you feel stressed or distressed or overwhelmed, that you're going to drive yourself off kilter and start to have symptoms of inflammation, start to have chronic disease. And with a personal history of autoimmune disease, I decided I needed to bubble wrap. And that was really the premise, and I think the driving force of putting out my new book, The Anti-Anxiety Diet, because I have found that when I'm looking for root causes, even if I'm addressing leaky gut, even if I'm addressing progesterone deficiency or estrogen dominance, or even if I'm addressing toxicity, that really one of the Achilles heels of wellness is anxiety or HPA axis imbalance.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly a good way to put it, HPA axis imbalance, because we hear like different terms thrown around, adrenal fatigue, burnout, different things like that, and really it comes down to our HPA axis. And I always throw in the gonads too, HPA-G axis, right?
And T and thyroid.
And
Yep.
T, HPA-TG
It just gets
axis.
really chunky then, though.
It does. It's a really long, but we imply them when we say HPA axis because
Yes.
every organ interacts with every other organ. It's like being in a community, you all interact together, and being in a family, right? Everyone has a different voice, but when they work together as a family, as a unit, there's harmony. When they're not, there's disharmony. And so that's how our hormones work too. And that's what when our body's not working well together, we get that disharmony and we get that anxiety, depression, the mood disorder. So I want to address that. Let's go into that. And I love your book, The Anti-Anxiety Diet, and it's so important. It puts forth so many really great points and premises that we have to take to heart. So let's talk a little bit about anxiety and how we get that, because it's definitely a part of a woman's life, a man's life, anyone's life at some point or another, right?
Yes. Well, and I think, unfortunately, we consider, and maybe this is my personal perception, but I see clinically, when I'm doing my initial consultation with a client, I'm spending the first 60 minutes of that 90 minutes just being an investigative researcher, or really kind of questioning all of their symptoms, all of their levels of dysfunction. And often they leave that initial session knowing themselves more than they came in, because they don't even think about these things. And when I ask people about stress, most people say moderate to low. And then you start asking them specific symptoms of mismanaged stress, like, do you clench your jaw? Oh yeah, I wear a night guard. Or do you have disrupted sleep patterns? Oh yeah, I'm constantly waking up and having rumination. Or do you have racing thoughts and anticipatory distress? Do you deal with heart palpitations? Do you have body temperature changes? Are you dealing with fatigue? I mean, you go through then the rigmarole, and it's like check, 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 check. Well, whether you want to deem it anxiety or unmanaged stress, or chronic stress demand that you don't have the tools to be resilient with, I think that my book is a great fit. And we really go into it with that mindset of, beyond those of us that want to coin or label the term anxiety, that we want to, or I suppose it's just me, I want to ensure that I'm really giving you the tools in your tool belt for the chronic stress and the multi-hats that we're wearing. We also, as a society, have this demand and this kind of award mechanism of, you should be a working mother, you should be wearing 12 different hats and doing 12 different things, and you just do it. This is just aging. This is just normal. And I think that little white flag of surrender often comes up with the defeat of the body. And my goal is to provide you to be more resilient, truly.
Well, I think one that brings up a great point is that all the numbers of hats we wear, I always tell women we can have it all, just not at the same time. But isn't it just as rewarding if we can look back on our lives from some point and say, oh yeah, I had that. Oh yeah, I had that. I had it fully, right? And to be able to have that perspective like you're doing now, you've created a bubble so that you can be a mom and take also your business and message in another way, right?
Yes.
And you're defining your purpose. The other thing that you mentioned was really important is that we don't know what's not normal if we experience it as our normal, right?
Right.
So like that whole idea of, I wear a night guard. Well, doesn't other people, isn't that normal? No, that's not normal, right? I always find that when I ask clients, well, are you constipated? Oh no, I have a bowel movement once every week. Okay, that's constipated.
Right. Yeah.
So we don't know what's not normal if it's our normal. And that's really important.
Sure.
To bring that. So let's talk about the anxiety and stress and resilience. And let's go. You've mentioned some of the symptoms of anxiety, like just not being able to sleep, clenching your teeth. Let's talk about more symptoms. How does a woman know or a man know they have anxiety?
Sure. So I think I often try to kind of classify in the individual if they're dealing with more anticipatory what ifs and list making and over second checking and hypervigilance, I call it, or if they're dealing with rumination and anxiety. And it can be on both ends of the spectrum of that anticipatory distress or that reflective, oversensitive, overreactive. And those are the primary mental influences, is the kind of questioning, the over rumination. And I often say rumination leads to bloat, just like in a cow. And it's really true. So my book goes into 6 different foundational R's, which are root causes of dysfunction in the body that drive and manifest anxiety. But it also discusses with up-to-date clinical research and peer-reviewed studies on how anxiety or HPA axis imbalance can drive dysfunction in that same area. So just looking at leaky gut, for instance, we use a marker secretory IgA. And so secretory IgA can be measured in the saliva, and it can be measured in the blood, and it can be measured in the stool. And when we see this value elevated, that's usually seen in acute stress. And the body does this with almost everything, where it goes hyper before it kind of crashes. So, we go into this high secretory IgA if the body perceives a battle, or if the body is actually battling a pathogen or a bad bacteria strain. And then over time, we start to see that secretory IgA totally deplete and plummet. And that's when we start to see leaky gut. And we've seen in research that social anxiety, they've done studies on people at parties, new social environments, public speaking, secretory IgA levels go up super, super high. So it's like an acute stressor. And I equate that to stress drilling holes in the gut, independent of your diet. You could be eating an AIP protocol, and it could be your vigilance of perfection of the diet that is perpetuating your leaky gut. And so it's a really wild, and then leaky gut allows more inflammatory chemical mediator action, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and interferes with our neurotransmitters and perpetuates anxiety. And so it's just this, all of the R's of my entry points do that dance of chicken and egg. And so I try to give the reader a quiz in each chapter to determine which area they want to focus the most energy and effort, and which area they may want to focus on strategic supplementation support and maybe do some advanced functional labs. Whereas every chapter they can incorporate the food as medicine strategy. But everyone's going to have their own unique entry point in the premises of what I see as foundational causes.
I think it's important to recognize too that, one thing you mentioned was AIP protocol, so the autoimmune protocol, so very stringent, very restrictive nutritional protocol, very good, right? So even in those instances, stress can overpower it. It's like that constant barrage that opens up essentially breaks down the fence to your gate, right, to your garden, and that causes that intrusion or that leaky gut. But how important the gut is, let's spend a moment on this, on how important the gut is in providing serotonin, or our anti-anxiety neurotransmitter. And let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, so I beyond the role of gut intestinal enteropathy or leaky gut, I talk about rebalancing or restoring your microbiome, because on both ends of the spectrum, again, the good strains that we know of, the lactobacillus and bifido, are the two strains that we've seen in clinical research to help to manufacture serotonin and GABA. And those are serotonin's more popular, I think, because of the SSRI drug family. But GABA truly is a huge influencer of anti-anxiety influence. Whereas serotonin has anti-anxiety effects and mood stabilizing effects, GABA has more of the physiological influence of stress effects, as far as like tremors, shakiness, shortness of breath. I think of GABA as a great tool when we're public speaking or flying on an airplane or going to parent-teacher conferences, whatever it is that gets us a little bit wound up physiologically in that stress response. And so when the biome is in a symbiotic state, which means a good balance of gut bacteria, and it has a good expression of lacto and bifido, we're manufacturing about 90% of our serotonin and GABA in that GI tract. And then we're calling that our enteric nervous system. So that is the second brain of the body. And that compound is able to contribute back and forth with our central nervous system in our brain. And then GABA and serotonin also have influence on receptors outside of the brain. And this is where we tie like fibromyalgia to low serotonin levels. The kind of systemic aching and tenderness in the fascia and the tissue can be due to low serotonin. And then, like I said, the low GABA can drive more of the tremors. And that's what we see to an extreme state with like Parkinson's disease. So having a good symbiotic gut is a big piece of production of the good neurotransmitters. And then comes the chicken and egg. If we're in a dysbiotic state or we have imbalanced gut bacteria, especially if we have harmful bugs like pathogens like Klebsiella or Citrobacter and the Citrobacter frundi, these strains actually increase our epinephrine, which is the bells and whistles of our alarm system, which drives panic, anxiety, elevated blood pressure, and more of this kind of fight or flight response in the body.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important to differentiate too. So when we're talking, like, let's talk about our common treatment for anxiety, right? Like, what would we as prescribers, what were we trained to write when we have someone with anxiety? It's the SSRI. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that
And the new kid on the block,
thought.
the SSRNIs. Yes.
SSRNIs, right? Let's just add
So,
them all in there, right? Let's
yes,
talk about
yes.
what that is and what that means. And
Sure. So, in allopathic or conventional medicine, we start right at neurotransmitters as the focus of anxiety. So, and that's really, I think, what's important for viewers and listeners to understand is the difference of how we approach a client or a case. When you're looking at it with functional integrated medicine, it's not just the what needs to be changed, it's the why is dysfunction occurring and how do we resolve from the root. So rather than just starting with, which I do work with neurotransmitters and neurotransmitter testing, but rather than starting with something that works on a receptor level and a feedback mechanism, I think it's first important to understand, is that individual deficient in this X, Y, or Z neurotransmitter? Are they excess in a different neurotransmitter? So we can be strategic in if we have to harness and lower something, like if someone's high epinephrine, I'm going to drive with L-theanine and I'm going to drive with nervine herbs. And I'm going to work with potentially considering a stool test to look if we have to do a gut cleanse, because we might need to plow their gut biome to reseed the good. And that's why, unfortunately, when we work blind with a prescription and we just are throwing Zoloft and Cymbalta and these different medications without even looking why, we're just using symptoms to prescribe medications, we might be throwing a dart at completely the wrong target. And that's unfortunately why we don't get the best outcomes. I mean, we see in research from the 1940s, we don't have any improvement in treatment of anxiety and depression. And all of these new drugs keep being developed, but they're missing the mark, is truly what I feel.
yeah, they're not addressing the underlying root cause. And when you talk about like plowing the field, it's, for example, treating SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth, because it's really important to understand we're not going to throw more. We've really got to cleanse the system. And so how
Yes.
did our keto approach, I got my keto green or keto alkaline approach. How did you start using that in the work with anxiety as well?
So two parts. So yes, totally. Bad bacteria or dysbiotic bacteria, whether it's candidiasis, like yeast overgrowth and its varied strains, or whether it's SIBO, or whether it's a dysbiotic bug in the large intestine, all of these bad bacteria strains and yeast strains feed off of sugar. And we've seen this in elementary science classes, or even if you've ever baked bread, how do you activate yeast? You add sugar and water and it goes crazy. And so we know that dysbiotic flora thrive in sugar. And so when you reduce your sugar intake in the diet, and then you take it a step further to actually reduce carbohydrate intake in the diet, my gut cleanses are at 60 grams of carbs or less. So that individual may or may not be ketogenic, but they're going to be low carbohydrate, they're going to be yeast free, and they're going to be very limited on their use of vinegar and prebiotic fibers and probiotics in the beginning, so that we can kind of create that sterilizing and plowing with strategic antifungal and antibacterial natural agents. And then, so that's one thing, is not feeding the beast, if you will. And then really the actual production of ketone bodies themselves have such magnificent function on the brain. And, so back from what we've researched with the influence of epilepsy and them being able to reduce excitatory nerve impulse and activity that drives seizure, ketones can actually help to sit on the brain receptors and give us a very grounded, mood stabilizing influence. And then if we have weight to lose and we're using fat as fuel, that can help with our sexual hormone balance as well. So there's so many factors on how keto can help, because even if we're dealing with estrogen dominance, we know that low progesterone drives anxiety. And so there's just so many pieces. And I think personally, when I am in a ketogenic state, which is how I live, I just feel really even keeled and less erratic, and I sleep better, and my thought process is much more clear. I'm on a high octane fuel, is how I describe it to people.
That's a good example. So with that, what is a day in your nutritional life?
Me personally, like what did I eat
Yeah.
yesterday? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right. Now I have to work my memory muscles. So I usually, when I'm in clinic, I eat, and so I see patients 3 to 4 days a week. And so I'm still seeing about 20 clients a week. And I do this work all virtually, but I like to eat in bookends. And so for me, what that means is that I like to eat most of my calories in the morning and in the evening. And I think it's predominantly because when I'm under high stress and I'm rocking and rolling during the day, I know my digestive enzymes are suppressed and food doesn't sit very well in my belly in the middle of the day. So I do a really kind of funky fasting model where I'll eat like 2 to 3 eggs, half an avocado, maybe some kale chips with that or some kimchi on the side, and probably also some other protein like some pasture-raised bacon or a sausage or something like that. And that's my breakfast. And I drink lemon water prior to that. And then at around 10 a.m., I'll do like maybe a little bit of fat in matcha or cold brew coffee. And if I do coffee, I like to add CBD to my coffee to help with that excitatory output of the caffeine. Matcha, I find I don't need to, so I use just coconut oil or ghee. And then midday, I may also do like a smoothie of sorts or something light. I might just eat frozen macadamia nuts or a fat bomb pack. And then dinner is going to be another like 700, 800 calories where I'm going to do, like last night was a grass-fed burger patty. I had more avocado, roasted Brussels sprouts, and curry roasted cauliflower.
Sounds delicious. Sounds delicious. And I think that's key, what you just outlined, and so helpful. I love to ask clients that and my guests, because you know how you've learned to work with your body and your stress level, right? A Sunday might be a little different. Yes. So during this work day, how you're accommodating your keto, you know, getting into ketosis, knowing that you need that high brain function to sustain you, and also know where you need additional support to sustain you. So I think it's really cool. Are you a rapid caffeine metabolizer? Is that why the caffeine in the coffee sometimes excites you? Yeah. Yeah. For me, no, not at all. So no worries there, but I love how you figured that out. And I think this is the tweaking that our guests, our listeners will appreciate as you learn, right? You continue to learn and find out what works for you. And as you are able to lift off the cloud, right? The carbohydrate cloud, or the glucose or brain fog cloud, you're liberated from that. You have the better ability to discern what is working for you versus what is working against you. So Allie, thank you. I put you on the spot there. I didn't tell you that I was going to ask that. So
and the weekends in the weekends I do a classic 16-8, and I do my fatty coffee, and I take my daughter to the farmer's market, and that works really well because then we break fast at noon and have a beautiful brunch from what we picked up from the market, and that's great. But I think that's a great point you make. You know, I always say one of my mantras is doctrine creates disconnect. And so you go into any new program, any new plan with rules and guidelines, and you start to feel better, which is wonderful, because going from terrible to mediocre isn't a very big change. But once you get to feeling awesome, then you can start to tweak the mediocre, and then you can get the kind of thrive high gear zone. And like you said, that's that individualized approach of, okay, I realize when I'm stressed, a kale salad and salmon doesn't sit well with me. And so I can't be munching on that between clients because I'm not going to appropriately chew, and I'm not going to appropriately break things down.
I think that's beautifully well said. I love that. I love that you said that. So share with us a little bit more about your book, The Anti-Anxiety Diet. You said that you've customized it, the 6 R's. Tell us what those 6 R's are.
Sure. So it's reducing inflammation. And so I go through the 5 primary pro-inflammatory foods, and within that, the 5th food is sugar. And so I eliminate corn, soy. I do eliminate dairy because of the casein protein, and then I talk about kind of within that world pros and cons and considerations after 12 weeks of removal. So corn, soy, dairy, gluten, and then sugar. And within the sugar, I talk about removing excess carbs and transitioning into keto. And then the next R is looking at repairing leaky gut. The following R is restoring that gut microbiome. The next R is rebounding your micronutrient status. So we talk about mood stabilizing minerals. We talk about the role of B vitamins and methylation and various amino acids that actually are building blocks for our neurotransmitters. And then the final two R's are focused on the adrenals, and we end with neurotransmitters. So it's, again, kind of more upstream versus that downstream swing of just starting right away with the brain chemicals. And then my book encompasses all of this with the last chapter, which ties it all together into a program, gives you a 2-week meal plan. And I break things down into phase 1 ketogenic and phase 2 low glycemic. And I give people options of whether you want to do keto for the first 3 months as a reboot and then transition, whether you want to cyclically use keto, and that's what I personally do. I carb cycle 4 times a month based on my sexual hormones, or whether you want to stay tight keto. And I give you guidance on what's going to work for you and things to look for as feedback within your body.
Oh, and I love that in your book you have great desserts like walnut maca caramels. You know, I'm a big maca fan.
Yes.
So you have your walnut. We have to try it with Mighty Maca. So we'll make them.
Yes.
Well, I'll use that recipe. I'll let you know how it goes. And yeah, and just good, healthy options for you, and fun recipes, and you know, the slow cooker carnitas, and just different things like that you've thrown into your book too. We always love that. Those, you know, those recipes.
I try to, with each recipe, open with a food as medicine focus. So, you know, what was the strategy of this synergy of ingredients in this recipe so that the reader can be empowered by that, and beyond making a tasty dish, they can use that information and apply that with their selection and, you know, their day-to-day intake, as well as other recipes they'll try. So they might really hone in on a particular ingredient like maca to a new user, and then find out about a bunch of different products and how that compound feels in their body.
Exactly. And I love that you put that in there, because that's like the story with the recipe. And that makes us more inclined to follow it or remember it too. So I love that you did that. Thank you. That's awesome. All right, tell
dinner party.
Yes, yeah. But tell our listeners how they can get your book and also learn more about you.
So everything is available on AllieMillerRD.com. So I have a lot of virtual programs. I have a food as medicine ketogenic program, which is a 12-week program. And then I also have a beat the bloat, candida and dysbiotic cleanse on there. And then I have my anti-anxiety diet book, as well as the naturally nourished cookbook. And the anti-anxiety diet is available at Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, Target. It just launched, so we're just figuring out all of our sourcing, but it should be pretty widely available where books are sold.
And definitely AllieMillerRD.com, AllieMillerRD.com. So we've got your website there, and we'll have links below to also some resources. And I just want to thank you for being my guest on my show today. And I look forward to good success with your book. And just like end with, what is one thing in your day that you absolutely must do to have a good day?
Take adaptogens.
Maca.
I would love to say breathe or something like that, a little more hippie zen, but it's take adaptogens. So yes, I'm a huge fan of maca. I'm a huge fan of ashwagandha, and I'm a huge fan of cordyceps and rhodiola and ginseng. And because I do wear many hats, I am all about that bubble wrap, girl. So I'm just layering, and giving myself the resilience I can so I can superhuman status.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. And for our listeners, please share this. This is valuable information. Check out Allie's book, The Anti-Anxiety Diet, and also comment on iTunes. Please give us a rating and refer this to your friend. There's so much helpful information in the Anti-Anxiety Diet book. So happy to promote it. Thank you all for listening. You're very welcome.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.